All right. Big news, at least for now, and by tomorrow, this may be different. The Joe Biden vaccine so-called mandate, as it is known, is going to be frozen, thanks to the decision of a panel of Republican appointed judges. Now, what we call the vaccine mandate, which is why I said so-called, is the requirement through OSHA that companies with more than 100 employees either have their employees get vaccinated and prove that they are vaccinated, or you just test them weekly for COVID. So it's not much of a mandate, but it's a protocol requirement, call it whatever you want. Remember that Fox News's protocol or requirement or whatever is stricter than what Joe Biden has put in place via OSHA. At Fox, you have to prove your vaccination status or test daily and wear masks in certain situations. All right. Well, per the Washington Post, a federal appeals court has frozen the Biden administration's new vaccine requirement for private companies. The federal appeals court in New Orleans, one of the most conservative appeals courts in the country, is giving the Biden administration until later today to respond to a lawsuit filed by Republican-led states and businesses. The decision was issued by a panel of 3 judges, all appointed by Republican presidents. This is the U.S. Circuit Court of U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. The judges wrote that there was, quote, cause to believe there are grave statutory and constitutional issues with the mandate. They have stayed the mandate while it is assessed further. What started all of this was a lawsuit filed late last week, just before the weekend, by some Republicans, including Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry. Now, it's really important. This is a temporary freeze on Biden's, quote, mandate. It is not a ruling on the merits of the policy. They want more time to look at it. It's important to recall that vaccination requirements at the state level, at local levels, by schools, by private companies, they have almost completely held up in court so far. The Biden requirement is different in 2 ways. Number one, it's broader. And number two, it's coming from the federal government. So it is different. That doesn't mean it's not going to ultimately stand. It is also not actually a mandate, since you can test out. Doesn't apply to employees who work remotely or outdoors. Doesn't apply to people who physically work where other people don't work or shop. And as we talked about last week, these requirements do work to get people vaccinated, very much so. You can argue that it should be against the law. You can argue that it's immoral, but it works, and it works really, really well. When we look at companies ranging from United Airlines to the New York Police Department to all sorts of companies, including ones where people were claiming, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. It works very well. Now, going back to the politics, this ruling was signed by judges. One judge was a Reagan appointee, Judge Edith Jones, and then Kyle Duncan and Kurt Engelhardt. Both were appointed by Donald Trump. This was the New Orleans-based Fifth Circuit Court, considered one of the most conservative appeals courts in the country. It is likely that other circuit courts, even given the same case, would find differently. It is likely that such a decision would probably not be upheld by the Supreme Court if it ever got to that point. Although we have a little bit of a wacky Supreme Court right now, and you never know. White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain was asked, what do you think is ultimately going to happen? He says he's confident it will be upheld. Of course he would say that, but let's listen to his reasoning.
I want to ask you before I let you go about the court ruling yesterday on the vaccine, on the vaccine protocols that OSHA is putting out, sort of the soft mandate. I don't want to call it a hard mandate because of the testing option. There's a freeze. What does that mean for the federal government's efforts? I mean, do you stop preparing for January 4th in the moment? How does this work?
Well, I think what it means for the time being is that the effectiveness of that vaccine requirement is frozen. I think it will certainly be well litigated, though, well before January 3rd. So I'm not sure it really has much practical effect in the short run. Look, these vaccine requirements have been litigated up and down the courts all over the country. State requirements, for example, one in Maine. And every single court before this one ruled that they were valid. The Supreme Court has turned back several times already various efforts to enjoin other vaccine requirements. I'm quite confident that when this finally gets fully adjudicated, not just a temporary order,
right.
The validity of this requirement will be upheld. It's common sense, Chuck. If OSHA can tell people to wear a hard hat on the job,
right.
to be careful on chemicals, it can put in place these simple measures to keep our workers safe.
So, of course, you would say that with the Trump travel ban, with all sorts of different things Trump did, no matter what courts were doing, you always say, I'm confident it will be upheld until there's actually a decision otherwise. But I do think Ron Klain is correct on this. That being said, there's a reasonable question. Was this requirement through OSHA the best way to deal with anti-vaccine Republicans, or has it actually served to energize them further? I'm very interested in how the French have done it. I have a family, aunt, uncle, cousins in France, and they came to me and they said, sir, because that's how my cousins talk to me. They are very respectful of me. They said, here in France, we have a big anti-vaccine problem. We have the distrust of government people who are anti-vax, like in the U.S., and we have the distrust of big pharma people here in France, like in the U.S., and you've got a lot of people here who believe homeopathy will treat or cure or prevent COVID. You've got all of it. And if they had done a mandate in France, it would have been absolute pandemonium. France took a different approach where they said, you don't have to get a vaccine, but if you want to travel, you want to go to a movie theater, you want to go to a restaurant, you want to go to the great cafes where you get the salmon tartare and these great dishes, which I love there. If you want to do all of that stuff, you just are going to either need to be presenting a negative test from, I don't remember if it's 24 or how many hours, every single time, or you get vaccinated. And the brilliance of it was it diffused the narrative of a mandate, but it was like, this is something really annoying. And so you had some people from all walks of the anti-vaccine world saying, I'm not for the vaccine, but I just want to do something. There's a specific thing I want to do. It's not about just being able to go to work. So I'm going to go and get vaccinated. I don't want to have to test all the time. Every time I want to go to a restaurant or whatever the case may be. So I'm wondering aloud, is that an approach that could have been maybe more effective? But then you have the question of, is that something Biden could really even do? Or does it have to be done at the state or local level? Our system is different than that, which is the case in France. So be curious to hear from you about that. One of our sponsors is called Privacy. Privacy is a totally free service that I've been using for years. Privacy lets me create virtual payment cards with one click. And when I use the virtual card, the money is taken out of my bank account. You can create multiple cards, delete them, freeze them, set a spending limit on them. Let's say I'm signing up for a free trial and it requires a credit card. Privacy will autofill a virtual card number, and then after signing up, I can delete that virtual card. So I know I'm not going to be charged again. Something really useful and very practical. Or let's say I'm ordering food over the phone, but I left my wallet somewhere. I don't have my real credit card on me. I can use a virtual card on my Privacy mobile app. But really the best part is you're not out there exposing your real credit card number, so you're not as susceptible to data breaches and identity theft. Privacy is a totally free service, and you'll get $5 to spend when you go to privacy.com/Pacman. The link is right underneath this video.